Okay, hello everyone. Good evening. I'm Sofia Freudenstein. I'm the Maharat intern at ASBI, and welcome to our Parsha class. What we've been doing for many Parshiot now is we've been looking at the Parsha, and then we've been looking at a Talmudic passage that quotes our Parsha, maybe out of context in a way that might surprise us, and then kind of using that Talmudic passage as a kind of commentary to understanding our Parsha better. So we're in Sefer Vayikra, which is a lot about sacrifices, and I think we've seen some interesting ways in which the Gemara helped us understand things that like Korbanot, for me at least, that feel a little bit difficult to understand on their own. And today it's going to be even crazier because we're going to be talking about leprosy. And so we're going to see how the Gemara maybe helps us understand or appreciate, maybe appreciate's a better term, is we can be more confident in appreciation than understanding of what leprosy is all about. And I'm excited to see what we come up with this evening. So I'm going to get the link for us here so you can follow along, and we'll also share screen. Okay. The link is here, and I will share. There we go. Awesome. Okay. Can people see? Yes. Hopefully.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay, so this week's Parsha, or Parshiot, is Tazria-Metzora. There's a lot of content about purity laws. There's a lot of korbanot, sacrifices connected to purity laws, which is probably the thematic segue for why we're talking about this now. And I think also for us in like a 21st century context, there's a lot of things in Tazria-Metzora that might feel like somewhat irrelevant or distant from us in the same ways that maybe sacrifices do. In some ways not, like when there's a discussion of in Tazria about the halachot of a yoledet, of a woman who's given birth. There's actually some things that are still relevant, but overall, maybe we could like come up with our own analogies of what leprosy used to be to like different skin conditions now. But the overall process of like seeing leprosy and then leaving the camp, there was like this kind of quarantine period, like quarantine before it was cool, quarantine period that people used to have, whether it be when the leprosy was on their skin or even on their houses or on their clothing. That's like not so common anymore. We don't really have that. And so I'm curious to explore the text with you tonight and then see what the Gemara does with it. So we're going to get started. So first, we're going to look at the first 8 lines of Parshat Metzora. Okay. So God spoke to Moshe and Aaron. That's fun that they're together here. It makes sense because we're about to talk about some purity, impurity things that Kohen would be involved. Okay. Adam ki yeh be'or besaro se'et o sapachat o vaheret v'aya be'or besaro nega tzarat v'huva el Aharon haKohen o el echad mibanav haKohanim. So when someone has on the skin of their body some kind of swelling or a rash or something that's colored differently, they would, this would be like leprosy, or here the official Sofia translation is some kind of scaly, gross skin thing. They would bring it to Aharon, the priest, or to one of his children. So already what I think is like interesting about this is when I think of what the priestly function would be is like giving korbanot and being holy, and it's also like they seem to be some kind of dermatologist, like they're
Yes.
that you bring your medical issues to the Kohen. I think is already like an interesting challenge to what priesthood is. So that's interesting to flag. Okay, next verse. V'ra'ah haKohen et hanega be'or habasar v'se'ar b'nega hafach lavan u'mareh hanega amok me'or b'saro nega tzarat hu v'ra'ahu haKohen v'timei oto. Okay, so we're going to get a little bit more of like the criteria of what the Kohanim should be looking for. So the Kohen should look at what's actually on the body. If there is hair, this is kind of gross. I guess that's the warning if like you're someone who doesn't like hearing medical stuff. If hair in the affected area has turned white, or the actual like, I guess, boil or whatever is like looks deeper, like it's like a wound that's like deeper inside the body. That's how you know it's sarat, that it's leprosy. And then when the Kohen sees it, they will say this person is now impure, right? So it's not just like, oh, here are your antibiotics. Like this was that they were impure and now need to go outside of the camp in a kind of quarantine. V'im baheret livanahi be'or besaro ve'amok ein mar'eh min ha'or usara lo hafach lavan Miskir hakohen et hanega shivat yamim. Oh, sorry. From before, this was that they were impure, and here's the parts that's about the quarantine. So if that white, the white coloring of the skin is not deeper than in the body, and also the hair itself hasn't turned white, just to be safe, that's when the Kohen says, go outside for 7 days. Just be careful. Maybe it'll turn into something that would make you impure, and you'll wait. Okay. ורעהו הכהן ביום השביעי, והנה הנגע עמד בעיניו, ולא פסע הנגע באור, והזכירו הכהן שבעת ימים שנית. So then they go on day 7, and then the Kohen checks it out. And if it seems like the skin hasn't changed, there's still color, and also that the tzara'at hasn't spread, well, just to be safe, because it hasn't totally disappeared, isolate the person again for another 7 days. Okay. וראה הכהן אותו ביום השביעי שנית, והנה כהה הנגע ולא פסע הנגע באור, וטיהרו הכהן מספחת היא, וכיבס בגדיו וטהר. Okay, then the Kohen comes again on the 2nd of the 7 days, and then sees that now the actual tzara'at has faded, and also that it hasn't gone inside again in the body. Great, now that means that you can do the purification process and clean your clothes, which sounds good, and then become purified. V'im faso tipse hamispachat ba'or acharei heraoto el hakohen letaroto v'nira shenit el kohen. If it has spread and not has totally disappeared, you have to do the same thing and show the Kohen again. And then the last verse we have here, V'ra'ah kohen v'hinei pasta hamispacha ba'or v'timo kohen tzara'at hi. And then if it's continued spreading across the skin, that's when you know it's like really impure, right? It was like this debate, right? First time we weren't sure, second time we weren't sure, and like really on the third time we're not sure, we're going to declare that it's finally tzara'at. So a lot of technicalities that don't necessarily seem purely scientific, but there seems to be something like almost medical here, but also maybe something spiritual going on. I'm curious if people have any thoughts or reactions to this, if this feels like really distant maybe from the way that they think about their Judaism and how purity and impurity, holiness, unholiness appears in their lives, or any thoughts really or questions. I'd love to hear before we move into the Gemara and see what is going on.
Hi, this is Audrey.
Hi, Audrey.
Hey, welcome back, everyone, and welcome, Tree. I was talking with someone today about how schools in Illinois still have a tendency to isolate students with disabilities. And so no matter whether a student is intellectually disabled or has a physical disability or is neuroatypical, a lot of school districts just want to take those students away from the other students and isolate them. And so I've just had this on the brain today. So this is reminding me that the more things change, the more things stay the same. So if someone has some identifiable issue, I guess at this time, what they knew to do was to isolate them.
Yeah. I think that's a really interesting comparison. In Maharat, where I go to school, actually, right before Pesach, we had a whole medical ethics week. We always have a medical ethics week before Pesach. And what I thought was very interesting this time around is that the choice of medical ethics was all about neurodivergence and the Orthodox world. It was a really interesting whole week, also to find that much material to talk about over the course of a week. I was surprised that it was possible. I was skeptical, and then I realized there was so much to talk about. And a lot of what we were discussing was a lack of understanding. And so often that's what gets us to not understand how to help provide better education within the educational systems that we already have. And I do feel like there is some kind of, there's something analogous here that tzara'at is weird. We don't really understand it. And so the way that, what do we do when we don't understand something? We take it out of our respective location for a bit. It's we don't know how to fit into our system, so we take it out. Here, this could be potentially for health reasons. But I think that there's a level of mysterious and maybe confusion on how best to fit this person into our society. And unfortunately, we still have issues like that today about how to properly integrate people that we don't fully understand or approach things different to us. So I think that's an apt comparison to notice that. So thank you for sharing.
Thanks, Sofia. I like what you're saying. And I suppose the idea that like disability would be contagious. I was thinking I actually don't know much about leprosy, so I'm excited to see where we're going this week.
Yeah. I also say, I don't know exactly what I'm going to do for Parsha Emor, but there is a lot of really interesting Talmudic discussion about disability in particular. And what we do, there's an amazing passage in Masechet Megillah about a Kohen that wants to do Birkat Kohanim but is disabled, and what happens. And it's a really interesting like discourse to see the Gemara talking in that time period about like so many issues of inclusion that we talked about today. So I won't spoil it in case we actually cover it in a few weeks, but there's definitely lots of material there, and I'm happy to follow up personally by email if you want to see some articles.
Well, cool. Well, please plan on covering it if you can. If you have time to include it, that would be awesome.
Awesome. Barry, hello.
Hi. First of all, I'm so sorry. We have out-of-town visitors and we have some family things going on, and there wasn't a structured time. So all of a sudden it popped up and the class had already started. So I had to.
Oh, no problem. They're welcome to come to class.
So yeah, they're actually a combination of socializing and eating, and I would rather eat Torah here. So I'm good with that. But that being said, my apologies for running around back and forth. And although I missed what you were saying, I have one or two things to add, and I'll be as brief as possible, I promise. But are you at a breaking point where I can say something?
Yeah, I wanted to hear people's reactions to the Torah we've seen so far. So now would be a great time.
Yeah, I've read some of this Torah. I'm not so I've already read it in my Chumash, which is 5 separate books of the Pentateuch with Rashi commentary, which is why I'm so heavy on Rashi. I'm originally a public schooler, so when I read Rashi, it's like it's like sustenance. So Rashi teaches me that Tzarat is not actually defined today. It defies a name of things that are going on even in his time, let alone ours, in terms of skin. But I think you described it very well. You used the dermatology term before, which was brilliant. So he says that, and I wanted to throw in a personal experience because it happens all the time. I see a dermatologist. I had gotten a rash and started seeing a dermatologist. The rash resulted from an allergy to fragrances, specifically five or six different chemicals of fragrance. So I'm one of those who has to use free stuff or wear gloves or risk getting a rash and sometimes skin cracking. And when I first got this stuff, although the dermatologist assured me that it was my age and that my biological ability to fight off these germs that everybody has to deal with in humanity, you have to fight off these things. My ability to fight them off started breaking down, and they started manifesting in these rashes. And my family started treating me when they were suspicious of the doctors assuring me that I was non-contagious, and they were afraid, and nobody would touch me. They wouldn't let me touch it. No shaking hands, no hugging, no anything in the initial stages. So I felt like the lepers of this time must have felt in that regard. And it's scary stuff when even your family, let alone your community, do like that. So the priests had an awesome job to do, and the victims of the Tzarat were burdened greatly by this stuff. My heart goes to both sides of them, those who have to treat it, those who have to deal with it. So it's scary stuff.
Yeah, I think what I appreciate from what you're saying here, Barry, is that as much as this feels like almost, I mean, it's pre-medieval, but like something like quite like ancient, like they're so scared about what is appearing on their skin and where it's coming from and wanting to distance themselves. Like there's even today, still there's so much we don't understand about the human body. And often it can be extra scary when it manifests on the skin that's so visual. And it can make people want to feel distance from us still.
And we behave like they did in
right.
those times.
And so to pretend that like we also, wouldn't react in a similar way, I think is a helpful reminder. So thank you.
One more quick comment, and that is, you mentioned not only skin and people, but buildings and houses. And Rashi makes the comment that God blessed the Jewish people, Bnei Israel, when we came into the land, that those houses would have lepers, tzarat, because at some point they would have to take out the stones and rework them and things like that, scrape them and rework them. And Rashi's commentary says that the Amorites used to hide their treasures in the walls in anticipation of us coming in. And they used to hide them in the walls, and the tzarat and the taking out the stones and the scraping led to us discovering their treasure. And so the people who owned those houses were getting the treasure that was hidden in the walls by the previous residents. And so Rashi says that God was doing us a favor by giving our houses tzarat. Just thought I'd throw that in there.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that those are the three locations, right? Like the house, the clothing, and then people's skin. I mean, to me, it's a reminder of like what my skin is, but like my skin is also housing or covering me.
Exactly.
And so I think it's interesting that tzarat then appears in all the things that like cover or protect us. I'm not exactly sure what the symbolism could be. Maybe it could be that like there's also a connection between leprosy and like saying lashon hara, bad things about people. This comes from the story of Miriam in Sefer Bamidbar, when she speaks badly about Moshe and then she gets tzarat. So that's the idea, like those things are connected. So there seems to be something about like the things that cover or protect you or disguise you, like that has the potential for deceit, and that like that tzarat is somehow connected to that. I feel like there's got to be some connection. But I think it's interesting that those are like the things that it covers. So yeah, thank you for pointing that out.
On that note, I'll throw in one more point, if you allow, and that is back in Shemot, when Moshe is at the non-burning bush, as I sometimes characterize it. It was on fire, but it wasn't burning. It wasn't being consumed. Moshe challenged Hashem, and I'm not the right guy, and how are these people going to believe me? And God, at some point, Moshe questioned the possible lack of merit of the Jewish people. Are you sure? Because he saw what was going on in the negative aspects of the society, from his perch in the palace when he was there, and then when he came into the group and into the society, and he saw how they were treating each other, and even our own captains or our own guys who were middle level between Pharaoh's guys and our laborers. So those guys, Moshe had wondered about how meritorious we were, and God penalized him by saying, "Stick your hand in your chest." And he does, and he pulls it out, and after he pulls it out, it sprouts tzarat.
Right.
And then God says, "Okay, stick your hand back in your chest again, and pull it out." And Moshe pulls it out, and as he's pulling it out, it's back to a normal state, non-tzarat. So, which teaches us two things: that don't doubt the merit of our people. God will deal with that. There's a penalty, and that relates to what was going on with Miriam, Aaron, and Moshe back in the Parsha you were mentioning, and also that God moves delayed in punishment. So as Moshe was pulling out his hand, then the tzarat arose, and when the first time, and then when Moshe put his hand in and then pulled it out the second time, it came out clean. So he was immediately rewarded with its normal state. And God is swift to act to benefit us, and delayed to act to punish us or to challenge us, to give us a chance to do tshuva. So tzarat goes back to Shemot.
Yeah, I think it would be a whole other interesting shear to see all the different times that tzarat actually manifests. There are a few other obscure examples where it happens also in Nevi'im, and I think it would make it clear that as much as it's a skin blemish, that it's like really connected to a deeper spiritual problem every time. So I think that highlights that really well.
And it seems to be related to the speech that
Yes.
one expresses a doubt about the merit of somebody, whether it's Bnei Israel or a specific person. It's Tzarat seems to be the effect that
Totally.
God inflicts on us.
Amazing. All right. Well, I'm glad people had thoughts about Sarat, because we're gonna have even more. And I'm excited to read this Gemara story with you, because I think it's really interesting. And I'm excited to hear what you all think about it. So we're gonna go to Bava Metzia. Bava Metzia is in Seder Nezikin. It's in a bunch of tractates all about tort law. This particular is one of the three Bavas: Bava Kama, Bava Metzia, Bava Batra. Bava means gate. So the first gate, middle gate, last gate. This is the middle gate. And it's a lot about property law, but then in the middle, there's all these discussions about the greatness of the rabbis. And so they start telling these like amazing, fantastical stories about different rabbis. And the one that we're going to be reading about today is Rabba Bar Nachmani. And ultimately, it's going to be about how he dies. He is running away from the government. The government, I believe it's the Babylonian government, heard that he was doing Yarchei Kala. Yarchei Kala was something that actually some people still do today, but what Rabbi Bar Nachmani had instigated was, it used to be that if you wanted to learn Torah, it'd be really hard for you to like do that full time and also be a farmer, which you needed in order to have money. Not everyone was able to live off of the Kollel stipend, I guess. And many people would be farmers for 10 months of the year, but then for 2 months of the year, they would be able to take a break from their farming and go learn in the Beit Midrash. And it would be like this huge expansion of who would be coming to learn. And there were like great stories and great Torah that was shared because there were so many more people around. But what Rabbi Bar Nachmani had done is he had like gotten some kind of tax break for the people who would then get to learn for 2 months of the year in order to encourage them. And the Babylonian king is not happy about it. So he is searching for Rabbi Bar Nachmani and wants to kill him. And so we're in the middle of this story about how he's escaping. And he's running away. He runs away to an inn. There's a king's guard that's sent there. And then there's like this miracle that somehow the guard gets distracted. So Rabbi Bar Nachmani has to run away. And that's where we're caught up on. And now we're going to see where it goes. I'll go in the English for the sake of simplicity and time. Okay. With that guarantee, the innkeepers where Rabbi Bar Nachmani was hiding, brought Rabbi Bar Nachmani before the messenger. They took him into a small vestibule and closed the door behind him. So basically they're hiding Rabbi Bar Nachmani. Okay. Rabbi Bar Nachmani prayed for mercy and the wall crumbled. He fled and went to hide in a swamp. So he keeps on having all these things try and chase him, and he keeps on running away. So now from hiding behind this door, now he runs to a swamp. He was sitting on the stump of a palm tree and studying Torah alone. Not only is he running away, but he makes sure to prioritize what he loves, which is learning. And it's interesting that, you know, in this moment of great distress, that's what he does. And it seems like because of that, he's about to get a glimpse of something fantastical. At that moment, the sages in the heavenly academy were disagreeing with regard to a halacha on leprosy. So imagine almost like a comic book. That's how I imagine it. You have Rabbi Bar Nachmani down on the ground studying Torah, and then we pivot to like above, and there's heaven. And not only is there heaven, but what's happening in heaven? It's not, I don't know, idyllic angels. There's fighting in the Beit Midrash. There's a heavenly academy above, and they're having a disagreement. And what are they disagreeing about? They're disagreeing about leprosy. Okay, let's continue to see what they're disagreeing about. In general, a leprous spot includes 2 signs of impurity: a bright spot, a white spot, and white hair. We just read this in the Torah, right? The way that we determine something as Sarat, if the hair is white and if the skin blotch is white. The basic halacha is that if the snow-white leprous sore, the baheret, preceded the white hair, then the afflicted person is ritually impure. But if the white hair preceded the baheret, he is pure. So we have a bit of an order situation here. If at first the splotch was there and then the hair turned white, then that person counts as impure. But if it was white hair and then it became a splotch, then it doesn't necessarily mean that he is impure. The heavenly debate concerned a case of uncertainty as to which came first, the spot or the hair. So they're debating, if you don't know which one came first, the hair or the blotch turning white, then how are we going to know if it's pure or not? The Holy One, blessed be he, says, the individual is pure, but every other member of the heavenly academy says he is impure. So God is it's not just like rabbis above fighting, but God is also a part of this machloket, this back and forth debate. And God says, no problem. Whenever we have some kind of doubt, we can say that that it's pure. But then the rabbis in the academy above, they disagree with God and say, no, it would be impure. So that's fascinating in and of its own right. Like they're debating a question of doubt. And then the people who are, or the people at play, the beings at play that are disagreeing are not just typical rabbi versus rabbi, but it's God versus the rabbis. And not only that, I think what's very interesting is that God is the one who's trying to be more lenient. God is saying, yes, it is pure, while the rabbis are saying, no, it's impure, which is really interesting. If I had to guess who was going to say what in between the two parties, I'm not sure that's who I would have said. Okay, so they have this debate, and then they say, who can now arbitrate this dispute? They agree that Rabbi Bar Nachmani should arbitrate. As Rabbi Bar Nachmani once said, I am preeminent in the halachot of leprosy, and I am preeminent in the halachot of ritual impurity imparted by tents. So they say, wait a minute, we don't know how to decide this. It's God versus the heavenly court. And for some reason, God is not the one that's automatically correct. And they say, you know who would really know what they were talking about when it comes to this? Rabbi Bar Nachmani. He's super knowledgeable in this stuff. So we should call him up. And obviously, Rabbi Bar Nachmani, it's a great time for him to just be able to drop everything while he's running away from the king, the heavenly court on the court on the bottom, the king's court, trying to kill him. Okay, they sent a messenger from heaven after him to take his soul up to the heavenly academy, but the angel of death was unable to approach Rabbi Bar Nachmani, as his mouth did not cease from his Torah study. Okay, so they said, great, we got to go get Rabbi Bar Nachmani, and we have to bring in a messenger to come get him. But what kind of messenger are you going to get in order to go to heaven? The angel of death, because you need to die in order to get there. And the angel really wanted to get Rabbi Bar Nachmani, but he was just so busy teaching Torah and learning Torah that it wasn't possible for the angel of death to reach him. In the meantime, a wind blew and howled between the branches. Rabbi Bar Nachmani thought that the noise was due to an infantry battalion about to capture him. He said, let that man, me, die and not be given over to the hands of the government. The angel of death was therefore able to take his soul. So what happened is the wind blew. Rabbi Bar Nachmani got distracted from his Torah learning, thinking that it was actually the king's court coming to kill him. And because he was distracted for one moment, the angel of death said, great opportunity to interrupt your Torah study. Now I can kill you. Okay, and then and this is where ultimately we'll stop shortly. As he was dying, he said in response to the dispute in heaven, it is pure, it is pure. A divine voice emerged from heaven and said, happy are you, Rabbi Bar Nachmani, as your body is pure and your soul left you with the word pure. And then the rest is really that they're trying to look for him. And there's a note that falls from heaven to clarify what the answer of the machloket is. Okay, so there's a lot here. Let me summarize, I guess, what happened, and then we can begin unpacking what is going on. So basically, Rabbi Bar Nachmani is running away, and he is learning Torah. And while he's learning Torah, we pivoted to a different scene that is happening in heaven, where God and the rabbis up in heaven are disagreeing about the nature of leprosy. Not only are they disagreeing, but God is choosing to be more lenient, and the rest of the rabbis above are choosing to be more stringent. And they are not able to resolve this dispute, even though the parties involved are God and everyone else. And they choose to have Rabbi Bar Nachmani come resolve the issue. The problem is that in order to resolve it, Rabbi Bar Nachmani needs to be dead in order to go to heaven. So we wait for an opportunity for him to stop studying Torah, because it was so pure or good of him to be learning Torah. There's no way the angel of death could take him away in that moment. We get this opportunity with the wind rustling, and then the angel of death takes him away. Not only does he take him away, as he is dying, he reveals what the final answer is going to be, just as God had said, pure. And then Rabbi Bar Nachmani gets rewarded, because those are his dying words, that he too will be understood to be someone who is pure in going up to heaven. So this story is quite odd. I find it almost sounds like a Greek myth. Like it feels like something that almost doesn't feel Jewish. Maybe it's because there's like multiple people talking in heaven. Like I'm so used to God really kind of being the only show in town. And yeah, there's like this whole cacophony of voices happening in Shemayim. And not only that, like the thing that is happening in Shemayim is, I don't know. I mean, I feel like people have like different visions of what heaven's all about. Like some people say, oh, it's like a bunch of cheeseburgers, or I don't know, endless television. And like, what is the Jewish vision of heaven? Having a ton of debates about halacha. And not only that, but having debates about leprosy and halacha. And then that Rabbi Bar Nachmani is, I guess, kind of there to be the one to like resolve this dispute, even when God is there, and you think that God kind of has the final shot. I think the story is fascinating, and I'm curious what your thoughts and reactions are about maybe what the significance of such a story might be.
In my time, but anybody else wants to speak?
I don't have a comment, but I need to go to another meeting. I direct messaged you, Sophia, but thank you. I leave you with Trudy, who always has good insights. So
Oh, okay. Well, okay. Good
no
luck in your next
pressure on
meeting.
you, Trudy, or anything. But
No pressure at all. But of course,
thank you.
have
Thank you
something
for
to
the great.
say.
Thank you for the
Productive.
great Torah
Take
study.
care. Shkoyach. Take
Awesome.
care.
Thank you. Okay. Any thoughts from anyone who hasn't shared so far?
Don't be bashful.
All right, Barry, start us off, and if other people have anything to share, feel free to share with us.
It's not the only time we've heard us. It's the only time we've heard. I'm sorry. It's the only time I have heard this story before. And I'm not a scholar of Talmud by any means, but I've attended some, and I've seen some other circumstances where scholars are debating, usually here, but here meaning in the earthly realm. But it's something about our scholars and our great scholars, these Rosh Yeshivot, that in these houses that disagree with each other and get almost to the stage of violence. They're really rugged in their beliefs, and therefore they're rugged in their defenses and their counter measures too. So it's not the only time we see debate vigorously in houses of study and Beit Midrashim. But I sent a chat note to everyone, I think, just a quick one that said, recall David HaMelech. I remember learning this story. I am not sure of its source. It's got to be in Talmud, but I forget who said it, or I forget where it was reported from. But that David HaMelech was, as Moshe was, his measure of days was to toll on his birthday. In David HaMelech's case, at the age of 70, and I don't know if he knew about it and he was trying to extend it or what, but he was studying on his 70th birthday, and he kept on studying. And in that story too, the angel of death could not take him. So again, a diversion had to be created, and it was outside the palace walls. There was rustling and some kind of noise going on in the yard, and David HaMelech was distracted and went to see the wrestling, and the angel of death was able to take him. And it's like, wham! Before these guys, David HaMelech was the victim of the same kind of event of distraction. So maybe not the same distraction, but the same kind of distraction. And the circumstance that these guys were debating about, the righteous ones and versus God, I don't think that's the first time that's happened either, or at least not the only time it's happened either. We've seen, I think, stories where I wish I remembered the topic, but it seems like I remember something that similar to this on another topic in another time, that these guys were debating, and another Chacham was the authority or something like that. It's somehow these kinds of amazing things recycle at least once or more along the way. I'll have to do some research and check it out, because it's just gnawing at me that these things happen.
Yeah,
and they're amazing every time, by the way.
Yeah,
amazing every time.
I have two things to respond. One is I know the story that you're talking about, so I'll get there. But first, to respond to your point about being similar to David HaMelech, I think what is interesting about this is it seems to me that part of what this Agadah, this story in the Talmud, is struggling with is like, how can such good people die? I think like that's like implicitly the conversation they're trying to have. David HaMelech, okay. I mean, there's like some things in his life that maybe are slightly more questionable, but overall, someone that we revere and appreciate. And how could it be that life ends for them, right? Like, I think this is like, there's a bit of a
Ends for
theodicy or
everybody.
theological dimension, and the way that they can like solve it for themselves is thinking, well, they were being good and studying Torah all the time, so they must have just been distracted, and then that's when the angel of death came. Like, there's no other explanation that would make
Yeah.
sense to rationalize. I don't know if we have that same view of like how death works now. Maybe also like we live in a world of modern science and we understand like the nature of mortality a little bit more than they did then. But I think
Maybe
that like
different.
that seems to be implicit in this conversation. It's like there needs to be a reason for why, like Rabbi Bar Nachmani can't die at the hands of the Babylonian king because he did something beautiful and amazing. He ensured that so many people who wouldn't usually get to study Torah full time could study during those 2 months of the year. Like, he shouldn't get punished for that. So we need to come up with a different reason for how he died, so he doesn't die at the hands of the Babylonian king. So I think that that's part of us going there, but that's also where it starts feeling like a Greek myth to me. Is just like it feels like I mean, it almost sounds like the devil. I'm not used to like, I mean, we have Chad Gadya and Pesach and talking about the angel of death, but like overall, it's not really like how I operate so much. Or like at any moment, like if you're just distracted, angel of death comes. So it feels almost like comical or like kind of like a Greek play, like that there's like this character that comes and takes you to death. But I think implicitly, like what they're dealing with is like this question of why are these things happening to such good people? So I think that that comparison to David HaMelech is apt. The other thing I was going to say is the point that you were bringing up is it's not the first time that if we have the option of God versus the rabbis, who's going to paskin more strictly, that the rabbis are going to be the ones that paskin more strictly. The story that I'm thinking about is the oven of Achnai. For those who might be familiar with the story, it's this really amazing story, actually also in Bava Metzia, where there is the rabbis and Rabbi Eliezer. So those are, now we're talking about people, not God versus another group. But Rabbi Eliezer keeps on doing all these miracles to prove that he's right. He gets the river to flow backward. He gets the carob tree to be uprooted. He even gets a divine voice from heaven declaring that this oven is impure, while the rest of the rabbis say that it's pure. And then it becomes this question, this whole thing that Rabbi Yoshua then says to Rabbi Eliezer, it doesn't matter that you think that it's pure because lo b'shamayim he, that the Torah is not in heaven. Ultimately, as much as the point of halacha, I think, is to like calibrate ourselves with some kind of divine ideal, we also have to have trust in the system that we have here on this world and how we arbitrate decisions. And so ultimately, if the majority of rabbis on this realm say one thing, we have to go with it, even if it might be being more strict. But I think a nice takeaway from that might be is that one might assume that God would be extremely punitive and black and white. And I think that is often like, at least within the modern Orthodox world of today, in the more right-wing circles, like this idea of like, well, of course, if you should be more machmir if you can. And what is nice about this and this image here is that God isn't always going to say that you need to be machmir. Sometimes it's actually okay to choose the more lenient option. And I think that like that's like a really healthy way to be thinking about God and what God and halacha represent. So I think that this is another example of that.
I have a quick extension for you.
Sure.
Not only Torah study, but other things that create what would be considered as divinely viewing merit. Just in yesterday's daf recently is the example of the debate amongst the Chachamim involved in the soda conversation. And there was talking about in what order does the drinking come versus the vow and the disintegration of the letters and et cetera. And there was great recognition of the fact that I think by the consensus, I don't know that everybody, but the consensus was that merit in some viewable way by God is delays punishment. And my gut instinct kept crying to me to tell you as at this time after you made your point, about these righteous people and these great people and having to die or not. Everybody dies. Moshe Rabbeinu, David HaMelech, And there's great debate in other parts of the Talmud about defending David HaMelech and defending Shlomo HaMelech, about the things that are spoken in Nach about where they went wrong or where they went astray. And there are guys out there defending them, saying, "Oh, that's not what he meant. That's not what he said. This is, there's great debate about this kind of thing." So, in the human realm, there's lots of debate, but God is in both realms. God lives. It's all God, and it's all God's. And so, this is God sees the big picture and the small picture. When I learned in law school, the forest for the trees. Broad scope, narrow scope, call it what you will. God sees it all. And God reads the hearts and minds of all of us where we can't read each other's. So God sees these big pictures. And sometimes it's easier for us to grasp our colleagues or our righteous human guys than it is grasping God in that sense, because God is so out there, but God sees it all. And God admonishes Moshe, I keep going back to this one in my own mind, that at the Sea of Reeds, when Moshe is praying to God, according to Rashi, and God says to Moshe, "How can you keep praying when my people are in distress? You leave what's mine for me. You take care of my people or your people." And it was clear. Sometimes we have to take care of ourselves, and here we are. The Rav here gets to take care of us.
Yeah, there's a lot of
and heavenly guys.
yes. These stories bring up like all these interesting questions of free will and how much we get involved in God's plan. And I think that this especially kind of brings up a lot of ways to be thinking about it. And I think what's so great about Gemara is that there's like so many different contradictory stories of how to learn from it that like we don't really have a very clear takeaway of like, what is Judaism's take on divine providence or all of these things? Like, I think that there's so a multiplicity of approach that I think is quite exciting that gets shown with these stories.
It's fascinating.
Does anyone else have anything they want to share before we go to the last source? Okay. Well, what I want to explore in the last source is about what is going up in Shemayim. Why is this the debate that they're having? And what this can teach us about the nature of a halachic system. So this passage is from the book Chaim Seiman's Halacha. I think I've mentioned it in this class before. It's a really great overview about like what halacha is. And I think it's also like it's made for a not Jewish audience, but that doesn't mean that it's not incredibly robust. It's trying to show how halacha is like a legal theory. So it's like written like a book of legal theory. And this story is in the opening introduction of the book. And so we're going to see why in the way that he explains it. So Chaim Seiman says, what is being argued about in this academy, i.e. the Academy of Heaven? The mysteries of the cosmos, the answers to life's true meaning, the secrets that emerge when theology meets physics? Is this where God's ultimate purpose is revealed from the divine throne itself? Not at all. Skin, hair, blotches. Not only does the Academy of Heaven forego any discussion of the cosmos, but it studies halakha, which is nearly always translated as Jewish law. And not just any of Judaism's laws, but some of the most obscure and technical issues found in the entire rabbinic canon. The question debated at this ultimate institution of higher learning relates to the laws of tsarat, the skin malady outlined in Leviticus 13 and commonly translated as leprosy. One might think that in a well-functioning heavenly academy, God would be sitting on a throne teaching authoritatively, while the angels sit in rapt attention below. But the Talmud's Academy of Heaven is different. For when it comes to debating the nuances of Jewish law, the angels have the audacity to challenge God, and God treats them as equals. The Talmud then goes one step further. God is not even the final authority. The role is instead assigned to a Talmudic rabbi who must be called up to the academy to adjudicate. What we have seen here is surely not the only view of heaven in the Talmud, but it is a view of heaven that only the Talmud could fathom. And in a few short lines, the Talmud has told us quite a bit about how it understands both heaven and halakha. First, not how the natural state of halakha is an argument about rules that have meaning regardless of whether they are used to decide a case. And we can only assume that there are no mortals and certainly no lepers in heaven. And even if there were, God certainly knows whether which blotch of hair comes first. But the legal rule reflects something important beyond its applicability to a given case or controversy. That is why God and the angels debate these incredibly specific details. The second point follows. Law is something intrinsically worthy of study, so worthy and important that it is the essential activity that takes place in heaven. To the Talmud, ultimate perfection is God and the angels arguing over the intricacies of halakha. So what Chaim Seiman is saying here is he's pointing out a few interesting things. One is kind of like what we talked about before, the nature of this debate, that there is a debate, right? It's not necessarily a given that debating would be an ideal. Maybe the ideal would be having things be black and white as opposed to having back and forth and different opinions to resolve what truth is. So already that there's a sense of back and forthness. Two, that God is a part of that back and forth, and sometimes God is not the final say. Three, that in order to resolve the case, they bring in a mortal in order to understand how to go with the case. And then also, so that then all being seen as like, because it's happening in heaven, is the divine ideal of like what we're supposed to be doing or what we should be aspiring to. And not only that, that like what they're debating is halakha, and not only halakha, but halakha that even for them in their time period was not so applicable. There's something about the beauty of debating things that even aren't totally applicable to one's life, that there's something special about what makes like Judaism by doing those things. And so I find that to be a very empowering image. This is why he starts it off, the whole book this way. He's trying to draw you in about like what's so great about halakha? Well, it's happening in heaven. That seems to show that there's something special about it. And that sometimes these debates, they have a real meaning and practical application, but sometimes even just the debate back and forth is fruitful enough to get us going, and that there can be something special about that being in the endeavor as well. I find it to be very empowering. Maybe like as someone in a smicha curriculum where we're often talking about right now, like if a meat spoon fell into a dairy sink, like what is the significance of that? I go, why are we debating this? Like, who cares? But what this passage reminds us is being able to argue about those things all together. There's something divine about that. And I think it's a really beautiful image. It's not just like a sad story about Rabbi Bar Nachmani, to be thinking like, what is the divine ideal in Judaism about what we should be doing and what we should be aspiring to think that it's having these debates about the nature of what halakha is. And not only that, but like having God be a part of the conversation, that we can also have the ability to share our voices and have seats at the table, I think is incredibly inspiring. And I think it's a really interesting way to bring Tzara into this conversation.
Yeah.
Does anyone have any comments, questions, thoughts they'd like to share on that?
I care about which spoon falls into which side of the sink.
Say that again.
I care about which spoon falls on which side of the sink. I do dishes. I wash dishes.
That makes sense.
Come on, you guys.
It's also possible that the image doesn't speak to you. Like it speaks to me based off of my current stage in life, but maybe this isn't how your divine ideal kind of works. Maybe it's a little bit more beach vacation kind of energy.
In my turn, I have some comments or questions about something, but I'd be happy to wait till somebody speaks up.
Yeah, let's take a minute to see, and then
Come on, guys.
Well, in my life, I was recently giving a lecture on something, and I noted that you can learn a lot about a culture and context by what laws they feel they need to have. So that's my comment.
can you say a little bit more about that?
What was I talking about? I work in a context where I have to like tell other people about government guidance. And a government agency in the United States just felt that it was necessary to publish on its website some really basic mandates. So that suggested that people were having trouble with it. And so that the organization had to like reiterate and write down and remind everyone, no, these basic rules need to be followed.
Interesting. Thank you.
Any specific example?
In the context of an FSA, which is a tax favored account for health items in the United States, you are allowed to go to the eye doctor and use your FSA funds, or you can go to the dentist and use your FSA funds, even if you don't have a dental problem and you're just going there for basic dental care.
Okay,
So-
like cleaning or something.
Like a cleaning, yeah. And I thought that was kind of obvious, but the explanation
job.
was that these things were being denied because someone didn't necessarily have a cavity or need oral surgery. They were just going to the dentist. I don't know. FSAs can be kind of annoying. So I'm sorry to take you off on a
No. It's a
No.
helpful reminder that all kinds of obscure intricacies exist even outside the halachic system.
Right.
It's also a good
Go ahead,
reminder.
Barry.
I'm sorry, Tree. It's also a good reminder that sometimes you gotta get back to basics. We see it in sports a lot. We just came off of March Madness, if you will, and some of the top teams that were rated to go to the top of their divisions and to make the finals lost in the first round. And the comment is often heard, you gotta get back to basics. You can't always look for the trick or the advantage. You gotta stick to basics. You gotta pass, you gotta dribble. My point being that sometimes we have to be reminded that it's good enough to spend these funds for dental care because you got to take care of your teeth. And honestly, I'm a bad example to make the good point. You do. And other aspects of healthcare. Healthcare is a great forum for you to make that point, Trudy, and it's great that we need to take care of ourselves. And hey, I can take that back to Yam Suf, like I said a few minutes ago, about God telling Moshe, hey, I'll take care of my people and what I have to do. You take care of my people in distress down there. We are down here and we got to take care of ourselves. And sometimes in its infinite wisdom, the government needs to remind us that. I think they did well to do that, obviously, from what you said.
Thank you, Barry. And I guess like piggybacking on that, maybe they could assert that if you have leprosy, you can use your FSA to pay for your leprosy or your dermatological conditions.
Yeah, if you can get them to deal with Sarat.
Right, if you have Sarat, maybe they need to list that as it's a covered malady for an FSA.
Yeah, how can you say it is, and who's going to say it's not? Right? Who knows?
Well,
So,
I mean,
the point is made. The point is made.
Like,
you made a great point.
Yeah, it's very obvious.
Yeah, that's great.
Thank you. Does anyone else have anything to share? Otherwise, we'll wrap up.
Okay, this is a great class.
Thanks so much. We missed you, Sophia, and I missed you.
A lot of messages.
Yeah,
morals of the story. A lot of messages.
Welcome, Trudy.
Thank you very much.
Yes,
I really enjoyed it.
Thank you for zooming in, and hope to see you again.
Yep. I hope to be back next. Oh, you're not going to be meeting next week, right?
Yes, next week I'm not able to make it, but otherwise we'll be back to normal. There's a professor coming into NYU that I'm really excited to hear from, and the only time she's speaking is 7 p.m. Next week, Wednesday. But from after that, we'll continue on with our Zoom classes. And if anyone wants any follow up in the meantime, I will put my address in the chat. And thank you so much for spending your evening learning some Torah with me. Hopefully the conversation was interesting, fruitful. Hopefully when you read Tazria-Metzora this week, you'll feel slightly less uncomfortable and more excited by what you're reading. Hope to see you all again soon.
Thanks so much. Take care.
Great class. Go up, everybody. Sophia, I told I told who I consider to be your predecessor. You know Rabbi Goldie guy, right? I sat in on her. I registered to take whatever counting classes I can take there because I want to learn. I count for myself basically, but I mean when I say for myself, I mean myself. But I try to count with my daughter's present, whatnot. But I was having a little bit of a communication interplay with her via text, but mostly email about Torah Lishma. And I concluded with, I have to miss tonight's Hadar County class, which is 15 minutes. It's a nice little learning exercise. But I said, I have to attend Sofia's class, which is a great class. And I told her in my email that, and I told her she could tell you if she communicates with you. I encourage Rabbi Goldie to encourage you to keep using your skills and your perceptions that you do so well. And
Thank you so much.
you're welcome. And I told her that I thought, and I think you deserve the compliment as a meritorious one and an encouragement to keep on going from somebody who sits on this side of your table. Being Rabbi Goldie, she was Rabbanit Goldie at the time, but because we're in a Orthodox synagogue. But at the time, she was teaching us Parsha class every Tuesday at noon, and it was a great class. And I told her that you are walking your own similar but unique parallel path as she did. You should be encouraged to do that. This is really a great class. Parsha and Torah is always great topics, even Sarah, maybe more so. And it's always great. And you do a superlative job, you really do.
Thank you.
Happily for me, you're not the first one to do a superlative job, but joyfully for me, you are continuing to do a superlative job, superior job, and I thank you and keep it up. And have a
Thank
great
you so
week next
much.
week. Have a
I
great week
appreciate
next
it.
week, too.
I try and take every unusual Parsha as a challenge, as a as a challenge
really great
accepted to
stuff.
try and make it interesting. So I feel like if we can get through like the Sefer Vayikra ones, like we're golden from there on.
Yeah, and you're doing a great job at it. And the Torah Talmud juxtaposition is really a great learning experience. I'm enjoying it very much.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Thank you for
Thank
sharing.
you. You're welcome. Well, you got to be encouraged because I want you to keep it up. Don't ever think that it's not appreciated.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Amazing. Enjoy your family.
Thank you.
And okay, see you all in 2 weeks.
2 weeks, yeah.
See you also, Mina, and have a good night.
Take care. Good night. Thanks.
Bye.
Shkoach.